The Federal Cabinet or Federal Government is the chief executive body of the Federal Republic of Germany. It consists of the Federal Chancellor and Cabinet Ministers. The fundamentals of the Cabinet's organization as well as the method of its election and appointment as well as the procedure for its dismissal are set down in Articles 62 through 69 of the Basic Law for the Federal Republic of Germany. In contrast to the system under the Weimar Republic, the Bundestag may only dismiss the Chancellor with a constructive vote of no confidence and can thereby only choose to dismiss the Chancellor with their entire cabinet and not simply individual ministers. These procedures and mechanisms were put in place by the authors of the Basic Law to both prevent another dictatorship and to ensure that there will not be a political vacuum left by the removal of Chancellor through a vote of confidence and the failure to elect a new one in their place, as had happened during the Weimar period with the Reichstag removing chancellors but failing to agree on the election of a new one if the Chancellor loses a simple confidence motion. The President is, however, not bound to follow the Chancellor's request in both cases. The Chancellor and the other members of the Cabinet are allowed to be also members of the Bundestag. And most of them actually are. The Chancellor is elected by the Federal Parliament, in which case the Parliament may within 14 days hold further ballots and try to elect another individual, which the parties in the Bundestag can now propose themselves, to the post with the same so-called Chancellor majority, whom the President is then obliged to appoint. If the Bundestag fails to do so, a last ballot will be held on the 15th day. If an individual is elected with the Chancellor majority, the President must appoint him or her as Chancellor. If not, the President is free to either appoint the individual who received a plurality of votes on this last ballot as Chancellor or to dissolve the Bundestag and call a snap election within 60 days. Following their election in the Bundestag, the Chancellor-elect will visit Bellevue Palace, the residence of the President, to receive a certificate of appointment. This is the moment the elected individual actually enters office. After this short appointment ceremony, the Chancellor returns to the Bundestag in order to take the oath of office. Having taken the oath, the Chancellor will once again visit Bellevue Palace, this time joined by the individuals whom the Chancellor intends to propose as members of the Cabinet. The President will officially appoint the new Cabinet members, again handing over certificates of appointment. After the ministers are appointed, they return to the Bundestag and take their oaths of office, completing the appointment process. The Chancellor as the chief executive leader. Therefore, the whole Cabinet's tenure is linked to the Chancellor's tenure. The Chancellor's the same powers as an ordinary cabinet, but the Chancellor may not ask the Bundestag for a motion of confidence or ask the President for the appointment of new ministers. If an acting minister eventually leaves the cabinet, another member of government has to take over their department. The Chancellor is responsible for guiding the cabinet and deciding its political direction. According to the principle of departmentalization, the cabinet ministers are free to carry out their duties independently within the boundaries set by the Chancellor's political directives. The Chancellor may at any time ask the President to dismiss a minister or to appoint a new minister. The President's appointment is only a formality. He may not refuse a Chancellor's request for dismissal or appointment of a minister. The Chancellor also decides the scope of each minister's duties and can at his own discretion nominate ministers heading a department and so-called ministers for special affairs without an own department. He can also lead a department himself, if he decides so. The Chancellor's freedom to shape his cabinet is only limited by some constitutional provisions. The Chancellor has to appoint a Minister of Defense, a Minister of Economic Affairs and a Minister of Justice and is implicitly forbidden to head one of these departments himself, as the Constitution invests these ministers with some special powers. For example, the Minister of Defense is Commander-in-Chief during peacetime. The Minister of Economic Affairs may veto decisions by the Federal Cartel Office and the Minister of Justice appoints and dismisses the Public Prosecutor General. If two ministers disagree on a particular point, The cabinet resolves the conflict by a majority vote or the chancellor decides the case themselves. This often depends on the chancellor's governing style. The chancellor has to appoint one of the cabinet ministers as vice-chancellor, who may deputize for the chancellor in their absence. In coalition government,